Alright, welcome. So example 0 is importing the pandas library. So that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and do. So we're going to import the library pandas as PD. Now the reason we are importing it as PD, you can actually import it just like this without any problem, but since we want our lives to be easier, we're going to import it as PD because every time we are going to use a method from this library, we're going to have to be writing pandas dot etc. So it's easier if we just do PD dot and then the method we want to use from that library. And I'll show you in more detailed example in a second. Okay, and again, if you do run it, nothing happens except that it's importing the library, but you're not telling it to do anything other than that. Example 1. Example 1 is importing a CSV dataset. So in the slides, there is the link and also over here. So you want to go ahead and set a variable called df, which stands for data frame. Set this equal to PD, right? So we're using the library pandas, and we're going to be using one of the methods, and this method actually reads in the data set. So it's read CSV. So this method reads in CSV files, which is what these are. If we click on this file, we can see that CSV file obviously stands for well, not obviously, comma separated value data sets. So you can see that they're separated, all the values are separated by commas, hence it being a comma separated value data set, CSV. And so you can either just copy and paste this link or just write it as you see it there. So you could either do that, just copy the actual raw link, or just, write http:/bit.ly UFO reports and go ahead and run that. And it's not going to do anything because, again, you're not telling it to do anything besides reading the file in, and you're setting that file equal to df, which is a data frame. So to make sure you did read it in correctly, you're going to go ahead and use the head method. So this head method now is going to print you out the first 5 rows of your data set. So if you go ahead and click run, you can see that the first 5 rows of your data set are printed. So row, and keep in mind that Python starts counting at 0. So it's not going to be 1 through 5, it's going to be 0 through 4 if you want the first 5 rows, which makes sense, right? So you have run row, second row, third row, fourth, and then 5th row. Okay, that's example 1. Example 2, importing a CSV dataset from a website. Now we did it from a link that's given to us, and sometimes you're going to have to go and find datasets on your own, and you're going to have to download them from a website. So example 2 is importing a CSV dataset from a website using Pandas. So we're going to go ahead and click on that website, and you're going to click on download or wherever website you're using. Usually there's a download button. You're going to go ahead and click on that, save your file. And once you save your file in Collaboratory, in this case, you're going to go ahead and click on files, and you are going to upload this file. Give me 1 second. Sometimes you have to extract it. So let me extract that. Okay. Oh, where do we go? Here we go, Netflix. Okay, so Netflix title. So now once you have that uploaded, you're gonna go ahead and copy the path. Just gonna click out of that. And where were we? Example 3? I don't think so. We were example 2. Okay, so you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna set data file equal to pd.read CSV. It is still a CSV file, and just gonna go ahead and paste that path. And you're gonna go ahead and do df.head, the method, right? Remember when we went over the differences between attributes and methods? This is a method. It has a parentheses and has parameters you can actually add on to. You can see the parameters here. And so now you can see the first 5 rows, and you know that you imported it correctly. So that's example 2. Okay, just realized that I forgot to do task 1. So let's go ahead and do that. So task 1, same thing as example 1. So we're going to import the CSV dataset using Pandas. So we are given a link. So same thing, we're going to do df data file and set this equal to pd.read CSV. And we're just going to go ahead and put that link in there. You can either copy and paste it or write it down like I'm doing now. And then again, to make sure you read it incorrectly, I'm going to go df.head. And you have the first 5 rows. Okay, task 2. We're going to import the CSV dataset from a website using Pandas. So we're going to click on the website, on the link, excuse me. We're going to go ahead and download this and save the file. Sometimes it's going to be in an archive in a zip file. So what you want to do is you want to extract it, and you can put it in whichever folder you feel like. Once you extract it, you go back to Collaboratory and you're going to go to Files in the bottom left, and you're going to go to Upload, and you're going to go to your folder wherever you have it, and you're just going to upload it. And once you do that, here we go, you can copy its path. Oh, it's still uploading, so let's just wait until it uploads. Okay, there we go. So once you see it, you're going to go ahead and right click, copy the path, and do the same thing. So df is equal to pd.read CSV. Paste that in. df.head to see if you import it correctly, and you did. Example 3, importing an XLS dataset using Pandas. So XLS is an Excel file, and so the only difference between Excel and CSV when it comes to Pandas is that we have different methods to call or read in each file. And so in this case, the only thing that changes is the method. So instead of CSV, we're going to just write Excel, and then we are going to copy the path, but first we have to download the file, obviously. So we're going to click on the link that's going to bring us to this right here, and you're just going to go ahead and open in a new window. And once you open in a new window, you're just going to download it, but I already have it downloaded. So I'm just going to upload it in Collaboratory by going to Files. And once I do that, I'm going to copy the path by right clicking and then just pasting that right in. And we're going to do df.head to make sure that it is imported correctly, and it is. There we see the first 5 rows of this data set. Okay, task 3, import this data set using Pandas. It is also an XLS data set, so let me go ahead and specify that. XLS dataset using Pandas. So you're just going to do the exact same thing. Click on the link. It's going to bring you to this right here. You're going to go ahead and download that. So once you do, you can save that actually. You are going to go to Files and upload that. Let's see. Okay, and then you're going to copy the path, and you're going to do the exact same thing. So df is equal to pd.read Excel, paste that link in there, or the path, and do df.head just to make sure you imported it correctly, and you did. So now we can see the first 5 rows. We see the prefix, the assignment, tutorial, midterm, take-home, final grades. So these this is a data set of grades from a chemical engineering student class, right? So that's task 3. Example 4, data frame attributes. So in the beginning of our presentation, we had a slide that noted the differences between methods and attributes. And again, attributes are the characteristics of an object. In this case, the object is the data frame. So we're going to go over some attributes that you can find useful with this data set right here. So first of all, I'm going to import the data set. So let me do that real quick. Let me add another code, bring that up. And I'm going to not import, read in the data set, excuse me. pd.read CSV. the first attribute that I want to show you is called columns. So using this attribute, it's going to actually tell you all the column names or the column labels of your columns or of your series. And so you want to apply this to your data frame, and remember that your data frame, we set it equal to this variable df, which stands for data frame, right? So this is your actual data frame. This is pandas reading in your data frame, but what's holding this right here is this variable df. Therefore, we can use df dot and apply any pandas method to that object, or in this case, the data frame. So we're going to do df dot columns, right? And when we run that, it's going to show us each and every single one of the column names. Now, this is one way we can do this. Another way we can do this is if we put in head. You've noticed that you can see actually the column names here. So that's another way you can kind of double check your work. But that's columns right there for you. So another attribute is dot shape. So when you use dot shape on a data set, it's actually going to give you the number of rows and the number of columns. And so in this case, if we use this data frame, it's actually taking a little while to load for some reason. Let's just give it a second. There we go. So it's telling you that there are 193 rows of this data set and that there are 6 columns in this data set. Now, if you want to double check your work, you can easily check for 6 columns. I mean, there are 6 columns here. But I would not recommend checking if there are 193 rows using the dot head method, because that's going to take you quite a while. And so it's better to just use dot shape. Now, the last attribute I want to show you is called dtype. So now, when I mentioned in the presentation earlier about data types, sometimes you want to know what type of data that series or column holds. And so in order to do this, you can do df dot and you can write dtypes, and that's going to show you the type of data, or the data type, excuse me, that's in each column. So in the country column, the data type is an object, which in other words is also known as a string, which is kind of like, you know, letters and words, or a sentence. Beer servings, in the column beer servings, the data type is integer, so all of the data in that column are going to be numbers. In this column, all the data is going to be decimals, floats, right? And again, consonant is going to be a string, and we can actually double check that. Simple check right here. If we do dot head, we can see that in country, right, it's all strings, it's all words, Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, etc. If you go to beer serving column, you see that they're all integers, same with spirit servings, wine servings. But then we get to this column, total liters of pure alcohol, and we get floats, and we see that there's decimals. And then again in consonant, we see that it's an object data type, so it's a string data type. And that can be useful when you're dealing with column values. So that's example 4. So now example 4.1, we are selecting from a data set, and we're also introducing exploration methods. So let's go ahead and bring this down, or not, let me just copy and paste it. Okay, so now that we have this data set right here, I'm going to show you the difference between bracket notation and dot notation. Let's say you want to select a certain column from that data set. You just want values from one certain column. Let's say you want, first of all, let's use one of the skills that we already learned. Let's do df.columns and see the columns that we have. So let's say I want to look at these columns, and let's say I just want to know the beer servings. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use df bracket, and I'm going inside this, what am I going to say? I was going to say parentheses, excuse me, quotation marks. I'm going to write beer servings, and actually you can see that it's already there for you. So once you write that down and you run it, it's going to actually give you all the values of beer servings right here. So it's going to give you all the values of beer servings. Now this is bracket notation. Let's say you want to do it with dot notation. Well, you can do the exact same thing except with dot notation. So beer servings, and it's going to give you the exact same values, right? They're just two different ways. Now, what is the difference between bracket notation and dot notation? Well, bracket notation is safer because let's say you want to, let me comment that out. Let's say you want to, say you have a column, right? And this column has, instead of an underscore, it has a space. Well, if you have a column that has a space, you cannot use dot notation because you can't do something like this, right? You can't do something like that. You always have to have an underscore for a space. It can't just be like beer servings without a space. So that's when dot notation does not work. Dot notation also does not work if, let's say, one of your column names is head. Well, if you do head, then that's actually a pandas method. So it's not going to give you the values of the column. It's literally just going to give you the first 5 rows, right? You're not going to get the values of that column. So that's another instance in where dot notation does not work. So if you want to be better safe than sorry, I would say use beer notation. Use bracket notation because you can't go wrong with bracket notation. In bracket notation, you can even have a space because it's a string, right? So that's what that is. Let me go ahead and fix that for us. Okay. Also, it is important to note that what just happened here, when I want to select a column from this data frame, you notice that it's popping up. So pandas does this thing where it automatically takes that column name and makes it an attribute of that data frame, which makes sense, right? It's an attribute, a characteristic of that data frame. So it literally makes it an attribute of that data frame. So you can just call it as it is. So if you want beer servings, it's already going to be added and you can just run it and it becomes an attribute and it tells you the values of that attribute. So that's what that is. Now I'm going to introduce you to some exploration methods. So for this first one here, we have value counts. So value counts, the value count method is going to actually give you what it says. It's going to give you how many times that value shows up in the certain column or series that you specify. So let's say I want to know how many times any value shows up. I just want a little summary, right? In beer servings, well, if I go ahead and do df.value counts and specify the column or the series that I want, and I run it, it's going to give me a little list here. And so what this means is 5 beer servings showed up 5 times, or 31 beer servings showed up 4 times, and it's going to go on and on and on. Let's say I wanted to know how many times each country showed up. Well, I can do country, run that. So let's say I want to know how many times Nigeria showed up. I can just say, okay, well, look, Nigeria showed up only 1 time, or Nicaragua showed up only 1 time as well. And so that's how value counts works. Unique is another method. So this one is actually going to show you how many unique values there are in a data set. So in this case, I'm going to use, let's say, beer servings, right? So in beer servings, I want to apply the unique method, and I want to know how many unique values there are. Well, this is actually going to show you how many there are. It's going to show you literally the unique values. But let's say you only want the number of unique values there are for this, for the column beer servings. We're just going to do n unique. So it's going to give you n for number, and it's going to give you the amount of unique values, which is 130 unique values in this data set. Okay? So that was example 4.1. 4.2, adding columns together plus making a new column. First of all, I want to take a look at the database, right? So something interesting, right? I have a country and I have a continent. What if I want to join these and have one column that's going to just say kind of like first and last name, like Malte Sarai, or like Sarai Malte, right, with a comma. And I want to join these just like Afghanistan, Asia, Albania, Europe, right? And so I want that kind of format. So let's actually go ahead and do that. We can, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use bracket notation actually. So I'm gonna do country, right? And it's as simple as this. I'm just going to add these two together. Continent, right? And when I do that and I run it, it's actually going to give me that little, what I added. But it's kind of weird because they're all smushed together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little space and a comma. So I'll go ahead and add a comma and a space. Add that together, and now once I do that, it's a little bit more clear. Right now you have Afghanistan, Asia. So what if I want this to be a new column, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to call a new column. I'm gonna call it df data file. Let's call it country continent, right? Don't forget your quotations. And set it equal to this right here. And once you do that, now that you can actually check it out, df.head, you can see that country continent is an actual column now. Okay, task 4. Without using the .head method, find the name of all the columns and the numbers of columns and rows in this data set. Well, we already did this. So again, if we were to do that, we would just do df.columns, right? And so, did I really just, sorry, shape, excuse me. So 193 column rows and 7, now after doing this, right? Now you have 7 columns. But if you were to do it with a normal data set, like let's say we were to import it once more, read CSV, it's going to give you 6 rows, right? Example 5, removing columns from a data set. So we first have to read in the data set. So now, first let's look at the data set from afar. So we have a few columns, we have some index, we have some rows, and let's say we want to drop anything. Let's say we want to drop the colors reported row because there seems to be a lot of missing values there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do df dot drop. It's another method, and I'm going to specify the column that I want to drop. So colors reported. I'm going to specify the axes in which is in, so it's a column, so it's going to be 1, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it's in place and it's a permanent change. And so once we do that, I can go ahead and check whether or not that column dropped by either doing df.heads, which we see it's dropped already, or we can do df.columns and see that the colors reported column is not there at the moment. That was example 5. Task 5. Our task is to only leave the columns country and beer servings in this data set, meaning we have to get rid of all the other columns that are not country and beer servings. So again, let me read in the data set, and once we do that, I'm going to look at the column names, and from there I'm going to use the drop method. And in this case, we want to get rid of more than one column, so we're going to put the columns in a list. So the first column that we don't want is spirit servings, so I'm just going to go ahead and paste it in. Wine servings, so put it in a comma. Liters of pure alcohol. Continent. Right? And again, outside of the list, you want to again specify your axes, which is a column, so 1, and you want to make sure that this ends up being true. And once you use the columns method, you can see now that the only columns that are in this data set is the country column and the beer servings column. Example 6, manipulating strings. So in this case, I am going to make another box and I'm going to read in that data set. I'm going to show you another method called .string.lower. So for this method, you want to start with df, right, and specify which column you want to kind of manipulate, right? So before we do that, let me just check. Right, so we only have country. So let's say I want, in this case, all the letters to be lowercase, right? So because we have one capital letter, starts with in all caps, and then it goes lowercase. Let's say I just want them all to be lowercase. Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add df country, right? And to country, I'm going to apply a method called string. And because it's a string, we can write lower method. And once we add that, it's going to turn it into all lowercase. Now again, if we were to use the head method, it's going to still be the same as it was before. Why? Because it's not in place, and we can't, it doesn't have parameters that we can say, oh well, in place equals true, right? There is no parameter for that. So because of that, you're going to have to rewrite or rewrite that column. And so you just want to do df country and set it equal to that. And now that we do that, we can do df.head, and when we do that, it's going to all be lowercase. There you go. So now we can do the same thing for upper. Instead of doing lower, we can say make it all upper, which is actually task 6. Make the values in the country column all caps. That's task 6. So let's go ahead and put this in here. Alright, example 7 is renaming columns. So let's read in the file first. Now let's look at the name of the columns and pick one that we want to rename. So I'm actually going to just pick colors reported, and I'm going to rename it to, let's say, colors recorded, okay? So the first thing you want to do is you want to take the object that you want to act on, which is your data file, right? Dot, and then this method called rename. So here we want to specify our columns. So our columns, right, and we set it equal to parentheses, and inside those parentheses we're going to write kind of like our little dictionary. So I'm going to write the column that I want to change, and then I'm going to do a colon, and then I'm actually on the other side I'm going to write what I want it to change to. So colors recorded. Okay, and you also want to make sure that it's in place equals true, so that this stays permanently. So once you do this again and you do columns, you can see now what is the issue. Oh, excuse me, it's not supposed to be parentheses, it's supposed to be this little squiggly, I don't know how you call them, but it's right next to the letter P in your keyboard. And now you can see that it changed to colors recorded. Okay, task 7, rename country and beer servings columns to country and beer servings. So apparently, you know, the only difference is that they're lowercase. So I'm assuming this is from the drink data set. So let me add this here. So let's read that in. df is equal to pd dot read CSV. And let's look at the columns, right? So we have that, so let's do df.drop, right? Sorry, rename, not drop, I don't know what I'm thinking. Rename columns, specify, little 8 brackets. And I want to move country, so she wants country, and into capital letter country. And then we also want beer servings to beer servings, capital letters. And then in place equals true. And let's do df, let's fix that right there, df dot columns, and now we can see the difference. We can see that beer servings and country are all capital letters, while the rest of them start with lowercase letters. Example 8, replacing strings. So in this case, again, let's read in this data set. So once you have that, you're gonna go and run it, right? So it reads in the file. And now let's take a look at the data set really quickly. So if you notice, these columns, right, they have a little space in it. So if you remember earlier, the difference between when I mentioned brackets and dot notation, when you want to select these columns, it's going to be hard to select it if it's like this, right? So this is not going to give you anything. Why? Because it doesn't work like that, right? It's a syntax error. You need to have an underscore there, right? But that's not how the column is. But if you were to do it in bracket notation and do colors reported, it's going to give you the values of colors reported. So how can we fix this? What if we don't want to use bracket notation? We're too lazy to do that. So let's do dot notation. Well, how can we fix this? Well, we're going to have to need to get underscores. So there's an easy way to do this. Instead of renaming all of the columns and making a whole mess of things, all we have to do is use this method called replace, right? Which you can use for strings. And so we're going to do df. Let me actually do it here. So data file dot columns, please. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in what I want to get rid of, right, which is the space. So I'm going to put in a space. And then what I want to replace it with. And in this case, it's going to be an underscore. And we're just going to click run. And now you can see that every column that had a space in it now has an underscore. And now we can actually call it df dot colors reported. We can do this now with a with dot notation. And again, set it equal to it, right? So now you want to set df.columns equal to this, right? Because you want to actually, there's no parameter where you can say make this a permanent change, and so you want to set it equal to what you had, df.columns. And so now when you call it using dot notation, it's going to give you the correct values. Okay, task number 8. We don't like the underscores, so replace them with spaces. Okay, so it's the same thing, except a different data set. So let's read in the data set. Put that in there. Let's take a look at the column names, right? So we don't like the underscores, so replace them with spaces. So we're basically doing the opposite, right? So let me do that, right? So let's do df dot columns, right? Because you're doing something with the columns. So columns right? I'm going to do string dot replace, and in this case you want to get rid of the underscore, so you're going to put an underscore there, and you want to set this equal df dot columns, excuse me, equal to this, and now when we call df.columns, right, it's going to give us the same thing. It's going to give us the correct thing, and we also call this, it's going to give us what we asked for with the correct columns. And that's that. Example number 9, checking for null missing values in a data set. Now there are different ways to do this. So first of all, let me read in the data set. I think, oh no, yeah. Let me just copy it from here, right? So when we read in that data set, you know, we have our data set. We can clearly see that there's missing values there. But what if we did not see it straight away? What if there were hidden values? Well, we kind of want to know where they are. So the first two methods, dot is NA, so is it null, is it NA, right? So NaN, that's what null or missing values are. So it's gonna literally tell you whether it is NA or not, like if it's true or false. So we're gonna do that. So df dot is NA, right? And it's going to give you the data set, and it's going to be either true, 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 or false, false, false. If it's true, that means it is a null value, and if it's false, it means it's not. Okay, same thing with is null. If you do df is null, it's going to give you the exact same thing. True, 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 false, false. Now, the only difference with the last method is that it's going to give you a much more detailed numeric response or return. It's actually going to tell you the amount of null values in each column. So when we do this, we can do df dot is null, right? And we want the sum of it, right? So when we take the sum, it's going to tell us, okay, well in the city column, we have 25 missing values. In the colors reported column, we have 15,359 missing values, and etc. and so on and so on. And so in time, there's 0 missing values, right? And so that's a much more detailed method to get the missing values. Now, once that you check that there are missing values and you know that there are missing values, you can start removing these missing values. But first, let's do task 9, right? So let's do another one. So task 9, again, is to check if there are any missing values in this data set. Okay, so again, we already downloaded this because we used task 3, I believe. So it is actually the grades from an engineering class. So copy path, paste that in. And to check if there's any missing values, again, just do is null, right, method, and take the sum of that method. And what's the issue here? Oh, it's an Excel file, right? Because it has XLS at the end. So clearly, we can say that during finals, right, so there are 3 missing values. During a take-home, there was 1 missing value. Okay, and now again, once we know that there's missing values, we can go ahead and remove them. So in this case, if we go back to UFO reports, let me copy this. Let me put that in there. We want to get rid of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this method called drop NA. So in this case, it's going to drop, it's going to do what it says, it's going to drop NA, drop any null values. And so we want to specify how it's going to drop, right? So how is either going to be all or any. So do we want to drop the row where any of the values are missing, or do we want to drop a row where only all of the values are missing? The difference is any means that only one has to be missing. Even if others are not missing, it's still going to drop that row. All means that only if all of the values are missing, it's going to drop that row. If only one of them is missing, or 2 of them, or 3 of them, depending on how many rows there are, it's not going to drop it unless it's all of the rows. But in this case, we want any. We don't want any null values in this data set, so we're going to specify any. And we're also going to specify what we want to drop. Is it a column that we want to drop, or is it a row that we want to drop? And we want to drop a row. And then we want to specify that we want it to be true, right? We want it to be permanent. And we're gonna go ahead and run that. And we also want to know, let's say we want to finally know, okay, the difference between then and now. So let me actually comment this out so we can actually see the shape of the data set before and after we drop the rows. So right now, before we run the drop NA, we have 18,241 rows and 5 columns, right? So once we run this, right? So once we run it, oh, excuse me, df dot shape. There we go. So now you can clearly see the significant difference of the data set. It went from 10,000s to just simply thousands. So to 2,486 rows. Okay. And we're going to do the exact same thing for task 10, which is removing the missing values. This is the same data set as this one. So let me copy that. We don't need this. So we're just going to do df.dropNA, specify how equals to any, axes equals 0. You don't have to specify the axis equal to 0, that's automatic. Like, that's only if you want to specify, like, it's always going to be 0 automatically. The only time you wanna actually specify if it's a column, but I still put it in so you guys know. And after that, in place equals true. Okay, and let me actually show you again before we actually drop the difference between the data set. So right now there's 99 rows, and once we run that, we drop, there's 95 rows. And so that's it. If you guys have any questions, please let me know in Google Classroom or in the comments below if I end up posting this on YouTube. Thank you.